When you picture college, what comes to mind? Well, I want you to forget all of that. We're going to go way, way back in time. I'm talking before printed books, before even comfy chairs, to see how the world's very first universities were born and how they kicked off an idea that literally changed everything. But first, let me ask you something. Imagine your teacher strolls into class late. Now, what if, instead of you getting in trouble, you could actually fine them for it? Seriously. I know, it sounds totally wild, doesn't it? But that actually happened. At the world's first university in Bologna, Italy, the students were the ones calling the shots. They paid their professors directly, so you better believe that if a teacher showed up late or skipped a lesson, they had to pay a fine. It's a perfect example of just how different these early schools really were. So, how did these incredible centers of learning even get off the ground? Well, it's not like there was just one instruction manual. Instead, the first universities really grew out of three different models, or blueprints, and each one left a huge mark on education for centuries. And this gets to a huge difference. Who was in charge? In Bologna, as we saw, the students ran the whole show. They basically formed a guild, a union, to hire experts who could teach them Roman law. But in Paris, the model was completely flipped. There, it was the teachers, the masters, who formed a guild, and they created an absolute powerhouse for studying theology and philosophy. And then you have the third model, Oxford. Its origin story is honestly a total accident. What happened was the King of England got into a dispute and suddenly banned English students from studying in Paris. So all these brilliant scholars had to come home. They ended up gathering in the small town of Oxford, and piece by piece, they built what would become the very first university in the English-speaking world. Okay, so once you got into one of these places, what did you actually learn? Let's pull back the curtain on the medieval curriculum and see what it took to get that degree. So the entire curriculum was built around something called the 7 liberal arts. You started with the basics, called the trivium. Think of it as your verbal toolkit. Grammar taught you how to build a proper sentence. Logic taught you how to build a solid argument. And rhetoric taught you how to win that argument. After you mastered that, you moved on to the quadrivium, which was all about numbers and the physical world, arithmetic, geometry, music, and even astronomy. And the way they learned was totally different from today. Their main method was called scholasticism. Now, this wasn't about doing lab experiments or finding new information. The entire goal was to take existing texts from ancient philosophers or the Bible, use pure logic to find contradictions, and then settle those arguments through intense public debates. And what's really incredible is that every bit of this, the lectures, the debates, the notes, it all happened in a single language, Latin. It didn't matter if you were from Italy, France, or England. The minute you stepped onto university grounds, you were part of this international community of scholars, all communicating in the exact same language. All right, so we know what they studied, but what was it actually like to be a student back then? Get ready, because it was absolutely nothing like going to school today. For starters, we're not talking about 18-year-olds. Many students were just kids, packing up and heading off to university when they were only 13 or 14 years old. Can you even imagine? And you can forget about sleeping in. Your days started at 5 in the morning. The first lectures began while it was still dark out and probably freezing cold. This was a life of serious discipline. Life was just tough. There were no printed books, which meant you had to copy down every single word your professor said by hand. Your room was probably cold and dark. Your food was super basic, mostly bread and a kind of stew called pottage. And on top of all that, there was super strict rules that controlled everything, right down to the long, heavy robes you had to wear every single day. So you've got thousands of students and masters from all over Europe flooding into a city. How do they protect themselves and their right to study without being controlled by the local government? Well, this is how universities became such powerful and independent forces. They had a secret weapon. It was a document called a university charter. You can think of it like a golden ticket given to them by a king or even the Pope. This single piece of paper legally turned the university into its own self-governing world, completely independent from the city officials around it. And this charter came with some amazing superpowers. University members didn't have to pay local taxes. If a student broke the law, they weren't tried by the city, they faced a special university court. And here's the ultimate move. If the townspeople started giving them trouble, the entire university could go on strike and threaten to move to a new city, taking all their business with them. This leverage was what guaranteed their academic freedom. Okay, I get it. This all happened nearly 1,000 years ago. So why should any of this matter to you? Well, you might be surprised to see how many pieces of this medieval world are still a huge part of your life today. Let's just look at getting a degree. It all started with attending years of lectures. Then you had to pass these incredibly difficult oral exams to earn a bachelor's degree. And for those who kept going, it meant many more years of study to get a master's or a doctorate, which you finally earned by publicly defending a massive research project, your thesis. Does that sound at all familiar? It should, because the system they invented is almost exactly the same one we use today. Even the graduation gown and cap you might wear someday, that's a direct descendant of the robes these medieval scholars wore every single day to stay warm. The bottom line is, their legacy is everywhere. The very idea of degrees like a bachelor's or a master's, university titles like dean, the fundamental principle of academic freedom, and even the whole graduation ceremony, all of it was hammered out in the cold, crowded halls of the Middle Ages. Which leaves us with one final thought. From the 5 a.m. lectures in student-run schools to learning everything in Latin, what one part of medieval university life do you think we should bring back today?